literally just be like, bye.
We're going live. I totally should have told you. Anyway, hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the COVID Fireside Chats hosted by OCD Gamechangers. My name is Chrissy. I am the founder and executive director of OCD Gamechangers. We have a board of amazing people. Ashley Anasted, who's in Mexico, practicing OCD therapy there internationally in many states. In the United States, Stuart Ralph of the OCD Stories, Kimberly Quinlan of CBT School, and last but certainly not least, Miss Margaret Sisson, who is the founder of Riley's Wish. That's our board. And I am a certified peer support specialist. I work out of Colorado. I work with people worldwide to help provide support and normalization for OCD. I'm the author of Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. And I am excited about our guest today, Windsor Flynn. Please introduce yourself to all of our viewers.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Windsor Flynn. You probably don't know who I am, but I'm an OCD advocate. I have a little Instagram account where I share everything I know about OCD. I talk a little bit about parenting and motherhood. I also have a blog. I feature some other people's stories about their OCD experiences. And I'm on the advisory board for Made of Millions. That's really cool because I've been a huge fan of that organization for a really long time. And for them, every week, except for this week, I do a series called Maternal Minds. And I interview women who have either got OCD postpartum or have had OCD and then became pregnant. And some of them also have like postpartum depression, anxiety, other anxiety disorders mixed in. So we talk about that. It's called Maternal Minds. I don't know if I said that already, but yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I have 2 kids and I'm a stay-at-home mom. And I have
I want to expand on that and talk a little bit more about the magnitude of how OCD and anxiety can impact people with postpartum, as well as, is it prepartum? Is that what it is?
It's called perinatal.
Okay. So, clearly I've never had kids because I'm all like, is it pre?
It's called, yeah, I think it's called perinatal. Postpartum is after. So postpartum is anytime after you've given birth. Perinatal is pregnancy. So lots of women, lots of women are anxious in general. So if you're anxious, sometimes it can continue throughout your pregnancy, and that's pretty normal. But there's a huge hormone shift that happens. And some women, like for me, with my second pregnancy, not with my first, I never felt better than when I was pregnant. Like my hormones switched in whatever way that all my anxiety and most of my OCD pretty much disappeared. So that can happen to women too. But it can also happen where if you have had no history of mental illness, no history of anxiety, no history of OCD or anything, you can become pregnant and you're like a different person, super anxious, depressed, starting to have obsessions and compulsions. And this also can continue through your pregnancy. It can end, but usually it will continue on through the postpartum period because the hormonal shift is just, it's like crazy. They've done scans where they show a scan of somebody, like a brain scan of, here's my hand. Okay, there. This person has OCD. So the brain is like totally lit up. And then they have the postpartum woman who doesn't even have postpartum OCD, and the brain will be lit up in the exact same way because your brain is just on fire. You have like all this instinct that's popping up. You are constant or like all of a sudden just aware of everything that's happening. So each woman when they give birth really has the potential, I don't know how scientific this is, but I'm just, they have the potential to have like full-on obsessive compulsive disorder if the symptoms don't taper down. Because when the baby's first born, you're super aware. You wake up when they're sleeping. Any sound they make, you hear, you wake up, you have to react, right? This is all instinctual. You want to keep your baby alive. But for some women, me included, the intensity just doesn't taper down. It stays, and it's just like very intense. You're on high alert the whole time, like can't even sleep. So that can happen. Do you want to talk about like symptoms that happen with women, or?
We can get into that here in a little bit. I do want to say also that, and I see this in meeting with people, male and female, dads and moms, just the shift of, even if it's a positive change, like having a child, this is the change in life that could have really ignited OCD to kick up, whether it had been there before or whether it might be the first time they've ever really experienced it intensely. So this is not in any way, shape, or form out of line from what I hear from so many different people, that having their first child or second or third all of a sudden kicked up a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, it's just like one of life's biggest stressors, right? You go to the doctor and they say, have you had any big life changes or big stressors lately? And the list is loss of a job, new job, moving houses, a new marriage, new baby, death in the family, right? So all those things together, new baby is just one of those stressors that even if it's a positive change, it can totally wreak havoc on your mental state, because there's just so many unknowns. And even for men, you wouldn't call it postpartum OCD, but men definitely become anxious or depressed or develop obsessive compulsive disorder when they become parents.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So obviously we have a lot to talk about, especially on that topic. I think there's, before we go into just how we're feeling about what's going on right now, I think it's important to say there is not enough information and not enough lived experience out there for what moms and dads are experiencing perinatal or postpartum in developing OCD, but also just the struggle that people might feel with such a monumental change. So I do want to say thank you so much for putting yourself out there and for helping people and just to normalize what they're going through. As we know, lived experience is some of the most powerful, it's one of the most powerful things that we can do just to help people know that they're not walking alone. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, just to hear that another person has gone through something even remotely similar to what you're going through can be so comforting. That's just what I was looking for. I didn't have that when I just didn't look. Like I hadn't heard of Catherine Benfield, or I think she was like the only one. There was no famous people saying, hey, when my baby was born, I thought I was going to kill it. Like there was nobody saying that. So
Catherine is such a pioneer in all of this. We certainly appreciate all that she does. With that, I just want to explain really quick what we're doing here. If you haven't been part of our fireside chats before, we really don't have an agenda. We come on, OCD Gamechangers is really, our mission is to help connect with people, creating community, helping people know they're not alone, helping people to know that wherever they are in their journey with recovery, it's okay to be there, and that there are other people there, but there's also a lot of us that have also been there. And so again, understanding that someone has a lived experience can just help people in the times of darkness, which Jessica and Lowell, we posted this on Game Changers the other day, talked about just being able to find hope and resilience in the darkness. And I think that right now we're doing these fireside chats because this time feels really dark for people. It's a time of uncertainty, whether you have OCD or not. It's so cool. I have actually some people reaching out to me that don't even have OCD, that are saying, I'm watching the fireside chats because it's helping me, because I've never experienced this type of anxiety and I need to feel like it's okay to feel however I'm feeling. So it's really cool that these aren't necessarily geared toward just OCD and anxiety, but that we can pull that in as well, and people are finding a way to relate. So thank you for being here, and I'm excited to be here today. And Windsor, tell us what this whole experience has been like for you. I mean, you can even start from day one and go up and down on the emotional roller coaster. The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, I have a little bit of health anxiety already. Like during flu season, I typically have my hand sanitizer. I have everything. I'm not trying to go to the millions of birthday parties we get invited to. And I definitely don't take my kid to those indoor play places that if you don't have a kid, they have these like, basically it's like an indoor bounce house or rolling balls, where like how McDonald's used to be like in the 80s and 90s, right? But it's all indoor, and everyone, especially in San Francisco where the weather's not good, everyone brings their kids in there. And it's great, right? It's a great time. But for me, all I see is like this just germ infestation, right? I'm like, we're going to get the flu. I hate the flu. I had a bad experience once where I was super sick, vomiting, and ever since then.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it's horrible. So before this even happened, before COVID-19 existed, I was already like, maybe we won't go there. And I want to know beforehand, have you been sick recently? So this whole thing, once I heard about it in the news, I was like, okay, so it's in China. I'm just already mentally preparing that it's going to come here. When it finally did, and we were shut in the house, I wasn't necessarily scared of getting it because we still thought that it was, just like a flu. Everyone said it's just like a bad flu. It's not a big deal. But then I started thinking, oh my God, they're going to shut down the schools. I'm going to be stuck inside the house with my 2 kids. I have harm OCD. So that means sometimes, or in the past, I have just had really intrusive thoughts about like going crazy, killing them, getting mad, killing them. Mm-hmm. Any way you can imagine, I've done it in my head. And my break from that is, when my husband's home to help us, when they're at school, I don't have to worry about that at all. And then just the idea of being at home all day long, like that's so many hours in the day to be having to feel those types of obsessions and thoughts. So that was my main concern. And I had just talked to my therapist about like, stopping therapy because I'm pretty good now. I'm not like, well, prior to pandemic time, I was doing really good. We were only going to do once a month just to taper down and just to do a check-in. But as soon as the school shut, I was like, okay, the first week was like super gnarly. I was getting so mad. But then, see, I'm already triggering myself. So like I was getting mad just because there's 2 kids in the house, and I hate to be mad because my OCD tells me if I'm mad, I'm more likely to become a violent murderer.
Oh.
So it was so hard the first week. Because I tried to limit those emotions. I don't like feeling anger because they're so weighted for me. Like anger to me, to my OCD, has always been like this big warning sign. Like, I don't know, that mom in the news who beat her kids up was probably really mad before. And it just does this whole spiral. So that had been my experience for the first couple weeks. And then I was like, I can deal with this. I've dealt with this before when my babies were much more vulnerable when they were small and couldn't run away if they had to, right? Like, so I just did my scripts, and I was able to use my tools and to get that under control. And then I started getting weird about the mailman, like dropping stuff off because he doesn't wear a mask. Mm-hmm. There's just all kinds of things, having OCD and not, and then having kids who don't have any boundaries about germs, like taking them on walks. They'll be like trying to grab railings in people's house and then rubbing their eyes or talking to the neighbor. There's just so much stuff. Now everybody is following the rules. So the actual virus anxiety is gone. And I'm kind of used to this isolated, trapped feeling because it feels like the postpartum period, which I've dealt with twice. But the latest development is now my husband, he's a medic. He's a firefighter medic. So he does all the medical calls on the engine. And a lot of the people that he works with are married to nurses. So the nurses are in the hospitals, like seeing COVID patients and everything. Not that many yet, but we just decided it would be best for our family that he quarantines separately.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's seeing the two kids like all day, and it's just like an endless one long day. So it's up and down. I mean, it's just hard. You have the mom aspect and then the OCD aspect and then the whole like everyone's dying outside thing.
Yeah, of course.
So that's where I'm at right now.
Well, I think it's interesting, and I would love to talk a little bit more about this. When a lot of people hear about harm OCD, they hear about sexual intrusive thoughts, some of these more taboo themes that people don't really understand because they don't have a brain that's dealing with the ego dystonic part of intrusive thoughts. And one of the things I try to emphasize with clients that I work with is that emotions can become part of our experience with OCD. So I love that you said, when I feel angry, that actually becomes part of the experience, and it's something I try to avoid because of. So when people say they don't understand, or they do try to understand OCD and really can't if they don't have it at times, if I tell my husband, Sean, I'm having a bad day, I'm having some intrusive thoughts, bless him, he's the greatest support ever, but probably in his mind is going, okay, she has a few intrusive thoughts here and there, but she's able to get work done and she's able to do this. And when we say things like, I want to avoid anger because I associate anger with someone who might snap and then beat their kids. And if you beat your kids, then that means you might snap and kill your kids and yada, 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 yada. So the amount of things that we are managing in living with OCD, intrusive thoughts, it's almost insurmountable when you think about it. I mean, it is surmountable, I guess, because we can do therapy for it. But at the same time, just understanding the magnitude of how it impacts us. I love that you brought that up. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that for people?
So
the emotional connection with like even compulsions.
Okay, so it would be like, it's not where, oh no, I feel so angry, I want to kill them and I hate it. It's not like that at all. It's more like if my main fear, for example, let's say like killing my children. So my OCD would create a story of, because I don't really know what that's like. I've not done it. I've not talked to anyone who's done that, but my brain just tells me that is really bad. That's like the worst thing you want to do. Let's never, never do that. So the way to prevent, for me, to never, never do that is, well, I need to know how one even gets to that point. So let me imagine and create a backstory of all these news and headlines that I read. And so I just make this up. Well, maybe that person is like this, super mad all the time, really irritable, not happy. Maybe that person never gets a break. And I create this backstory. And so my OCD is like, well, we can't be like that at all. Not even close. Because in any way that you're like that brings you one step closer to having this obsession. The end game is going to be true, right? It's going to happen. Of course it won't, but that's like the logic, right? The OCD logic. So I would have a whole list of things that I wasn't allowed to do, wasn't allowed to feel, situations that I would avoid so that I could make sure that I didn't feel mad, that I didn't feel stuck, that I didn't feel too much freedom and fun if I went out without my kids, because who knows, what if I love it so much? I decide, well, I don't want kids at all. Maybe I'll just kill them or something. And so to manage those emotions, the OCD, I would have to be mentally checking myself the whole day. That was the biggest compulsion, checking my feelings. Am I really mad that my son threw his food on the floor? People don't get mad about that. Or do they get mad about that? Is this the normal amount of anger? Is this the normal amount of boredom that I feel? Is this a normal amount of resentment that I feel? But resentment is a heavy word. So maybe I won't even say resentment. I'll push that aside. I'll hide that. I'll bury that deep down. Maybe I just feel irritated. That's a safer word. That has not as much meaning to it, right? It's a lighter word. That's what my OCD says. Maybe I won't even go out with my friends because I love my kids so much. I don't even need to do that anymore in case I like it too much. I don't even want to go out and hang out with my friends because the whole time I would be trying to see how much fun am I having? Do I miss them? What does this mean if I don't miss them? And then all that goes down and down and down to, so are you going to kill your kids or not? And it's like, who the fuck knows? Because I don't know. I can't tell the future, but I'm trying to figure it out literally every second of the day. And every second of the day, I'm trying to do my best to make sure that I never do. And that's more than just not thinking the thoughts. It's literally micromanaging every activity, everything. Like there's nothing that wasn't or doesn't go unmanaged or unnoticed. Does that make sense?
All to prevent an outcome that's not going to happen anyway.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I mean, it makes sense to me because I live it and have lived it in lots of different forms. It's interesting to me, and I definitely want to talk about this in regards to people who are experiencing harm or pedophilia theme, of course, or even relationship thing, and they're stuck at home with their spouses and their kids. But it's interesting because I've had lots of conversations this week for some reason with people I've met with on the idea that people with OCD get to a point where they can't trust their emotions. And it's not that when I have an emotion, I don't really feel it and it's not validated at all. But at the same time, you get to a point in your life with OCD that you are, why did I feel this? What does this mean? I need to know this. What does this mean? Because I felt that way. But does that mean that if this person felt this way, before they came out of the closet, does that mean if I feel that way, then that means I'm gay? Or if that just, if I feel this way, then that means that I have this disease or whatever. Like we get so hyper focused on things that we can't even trust our own emotions. And
no.
Interesting conversation I just had a little bit earlier today was that's why often we need validation from a whole realm of people. I feel this way. Is this the normal way to feel? Do you feel this way? What do you think about this? Would you be mad if you were me? Would you be sad if you were me? Would you feel this and this and this? Because it's this, when you grow up with OCD and you live with this for however long, and you were constantly back and forth, even though the truth is here and we know it, but then it's like, but is that really the truth? And then you dance around it.
Yeah.
It just takes an absolute toll on your self-esteem, your worth.
You learn how to trust anything that you feel. And then how do you go on in your life to make these big decisions? Go with your heart. Go with your gut. Do what you feel. And you're like, I don't know what that is. So now I'll just be stuck here, not knowing and not doing anything because how do I know what the right decision is? I can't even tell if I'm mad or not.
Or if it's okay to be mad.
Yeah, which it is okay. But when you're in OCD, nothing is just what it is. It's that with 8,000 things behind it that are just made up.
That we're essentially analyzing, looking for proof about something that there's really no answer to. I mean, the scary part, I think, for people, and especially when you learn how to manage OCD, which is going to be exposure response prevention. So it's preventing the response after being exposed to something that you have spent a lot of years fearing, is being able to learn how to say to yourself, yeah, maybe I am a violent killer. Yeah, maybe I am a pedophile. Yeah, maybe, I am, if you're worried about sexual orientation. So if someone that's gay is like, well, maybe I am straight, or someone who's gay or straight, maybe I am gay. Getting to that point where you have to just push into the uncertainty of that, that's the remedy.
Yeah, and it works. It really works.
It really works, but it sucks.
Well, because it's hard.
So unfair.
Yeah, and because so much of OCD, at least for me, was like just not saying things out loud, not putting it out there into the universe, right? Because you hear, I think I just did a post about this, but it's like you hear like things, people talk about manifestation all the time and just put your thoughts out there into the universe. You get what you think, and you're like, no, please, no, please let
it's
that
the movie The Secret. You remember when that came out?
I read that book recently because like maybe in November, it was at the Airbnb I was staying at, and every page I was like, the OCD community should have a book burning party, and this should be the first book, because it was like, you are your thoughts. Your thoughts have power. It even said something about the people in the Holocaust had like thought basically that it was their fault for thinking in a negative way. And I was like,
oh,
okay,
no.
It was some bullshit. It was like very dangerous to people who have OCD to read.
Yeah. Well, and we definitely don't have to get into the intricacies of exposure response prevention, but it's often people will resist doing ERP because of that very reason. It's I can't justify facing my fear. So ERP is basically facing your fear. And people think to themselves, I can't face my fear if it's violent, intrusive thoughts or sexual intrusive thoughts, because if I'm putting it out there and I'm not arguing back with it, that means that intentionally, that's what I'm going to get back, because that's what that thinking is, the new age kind of. Yeah. Yes. And the truth is, I actually believe in putting your intention out there. I do. I'm one of them. Yeah. I'm not an avid secret follower at all, but I do believe that. But this is what I also believe is,
well, it takes action.
It's also really intention. So if we're talking about OCD, and the end result is I live a life of value, and I can do that while I have intrusive thoughts. I'm just not going to respond to them. If you're here and you're sick, and here's the end result, I'm trying to get in here. And then all of this in here is ERP, which is the scary stuff of facing the thoughts, not arguing back, allowing them to be there, even sometimes encouraging them. It's almost the same as when someone has cancer and the intention is, I want to get better and I'll do whatever it takes to get better. So I will do chemotherapy, which wreaks havoc on your body.
Yeah, it makes you really sick.
But the intention is, I will do what it takes to get better. So if you don't do that, then your intention is, I'm going to stay sick and possibly lose my life. There's no difference with OCD. ERP it wreaks havoc on your mind and sometimes your heart and your emotions. But the intention is, I'm going to do it to get better. And if I don't, I stay sick.
Totally. I was so resistant for like a year. I didn't do any exposures because it just so happened that with my second kid, I had my second mental breakdown. Like, I think she was 4 months old. She was born in June. By September, I was losing my marbles. October was crazy. I didn't even know if the trees were real. I didn't know OCD, not OCD, right? I was losing it. So November, I get with my OCD specialist. And then, you do like your education and knowledge first. And then my father-in-law got sick in January. And then he died in March. So there's so much other stuff going on that we didn't even start our exposures. I was in no place ready to start the exposures because I'm not going to try to purposely bring on more anxiety, right? I had to try to just keep it level. But the second when I finally agreed to even write a script, to even just write some of those things down, I felt better, much better, just within after that session, just after one session of trying ERP. So yeah, it's super shitty and it's not for the faint of heart, but it's very effective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, were you resisting ERP or were there just obstacles?
Also, I was resisting it because I was like, hell no, I'm not going to write that down. You have to be crazy. Why would I ever write that down? It's going to come true.
So if people are listening and you don't know what scripts are, it's a type of exposure response prevention. Again, I want to just say that we do not recommend doing ERP without a professional, but scripts are a way of facing your fear by writing a story that is typically going to confront the opposite of what you have been fearing. So, for example, if someone has the script, or if someone has a intrusive thought about having a disease, and it is they're worried that the disease is going to kill them, and they are worried every day, all day, and taking all these precautions. The script that you might write is, when I get this disease, this is what's going to happen, and this is how I'm going to spiral down, and then this is what my death will look like, and I'm going to plan my funeral. So it's a direct, contrast to what you are typically doing, which is, I can't think about anything, so all of a sudden I'm going to put it all down on paper. Every time I read this, I'm going to encourage my anxiety to come up. And so then I get used to inviting the feelings in. And over time, you get to a point where you're almost not bored with the script. I don't like using that term, but you just read the script and it doesn't have the same impact.
It doesn't have the shock value as it did.
Right. Right. So it's the ultimate, let's face the fears and not even, and just push into them. And eventually, in doing that over and over and over, you're communicating to that behavioral part of the brain, there's no threat here, and so you don't need to keep warning me. So
yeah.
So with that, right now, people are struggling with this, Windsor. They're whether they're in the throes of OCD or whether they've already been through treatment. This is because everybody. A lot of time. Okay, let's just address this. We see all these things about how let's just take some time and enjoy being around family, and we're going to look back on this time and it's going to be the greatest time ever. Well, it's not going to be the greatest time ever for people who may have harm fears.
Yeah,
or pedophilia themed fears, which, by the way, is the fear that you're going to snap and harm your child sexually. It's very, very common for people with OCD. It's not pedophile sympathizing.
No.
It's more along the lines of having intrusive thoughts of what if. And so what can you say, or what's your experience right now with being saturated with these fears, when sometimes getting a break, like the kids being at school, you don't have to be saturated in anxiety all the
time? I don't know. It's been almost 6 years since that I've really had harm OCD, and the harm obsession. So I don't know. I'm used to it. But it has been it's been a little bit difficult to address, because even where I was so recovered, or that doesn't bother me anymore, I've had a few really good intrusive thoughts. They did their job. They got the OCD spiraling. And I had that moment that you have so often before you really start treatment. You're like, oh my God, am I going to do it? Am I doing it right now? Am I going to do it? Is this what's happening right now in 5 minutes? It comes up. And I think it's because it's there's no way around the thoughts, because the trigger is always there in your face. So it's going to happen. I would just say, if you're experiencing it right now, just expect that your OCD is going to give you a run for your money. Yeah. Expect that your intrusive thoughts are going to come barreling through, because this is a time of it's unprecedented what's happening. The anxiety is so high, even separate from OCD, the anxiety and the stress, and having your kids at home all day, trying to do your work if you work from home, trying to clean, trying to cook food, trying to even go to the bathroom by yourself. Just that stress alone is enough to make someone go cuckoo. Mm-hmm. And so if you add your OCD in, it just makes it really hard. So I would just say, expect to have a few hard days, but then just try your super hardest to use the tools that you were using in the very beginning. Even though it doesn't feel like the time, ramp up your exposures. Mm-hmm. Go write something down really quick. Write that imaginal script, even if you're not that worried, and even if it was just a few intrusive thoughts. Just go back to the beginning and do it all the way, and get it over with, because I think that right now, even for people who probably could say that they were symptom free for a while, are probably in symptoms a little bit. There's just, the only way around it, I think, is to not be alarmed. Like when your symptoms come back, instead of being like, oh no, I'm in a relapse, which is when I think things start to get crazy if you think about it too much. It's like becomes this huge hurdle that may or may not happen. But when it comes to you during the day, you can just be like, okay, today my OCD is here and I'm just going to sneak away, do a little quick script. If you can't sneak away, I just do them quickly in my head. Do you do those? Just like,
I kind of have a standard response to things when it hits, and just right on and spot on in what you're saying. I always encourage people to, instead of, and especially during this time, wake up and say, I really hope OCD doesn't show up today, to really drive home the point of OCD is going to show up today. So when it does, I'm not going to judge or be disappointed. But you also have the choice to, do you want to invite OCD in for a cup of coffee and let's just start the day together? Because OCD is either going to beat down the door or you're going to open it.
It's better if you just let them in. Like the first week when I was struggling, when I was like, no, I don't want to have intrusive thoughts, I'm going to be alone, I don't want this to come back. That was the worst time. When I finally was just like, fuck it, what am I going to do today in my imagination? It was like, okay, great, fine, let's watch Shaun the Sheep, let's do whatever. I had that thought, I entertained it, and I'm just going to let it ride until the next one comes.
And that's what's so hard about it, I think, for people, is just the not wanting it to happen and the not wanting it to show up. I mean, we're all that way. And I do like to say, the more we identify a day as good or bad because OCD showed up, is the more that we're buying into the pendulum. The pendulum swung this way, and oh my God, it was such a good day. Please let tomorrow be a good day. It can be a good day any day OCD shows up. As long as you're ready for it and you're not judgmental of yourself when it does, and that you don't allow those emotions that also come with it, which we, mentioned earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning again. We identify emotions as good or bad based on whatever OCD shows up, or just based on our upbringing or our experience with OCD. And so the more we identify anger as a bad emotion, or resentment as a bad emotion, or envy or sadness, these things that just have a negative connotation, A, we're missing out on just the full balance of life because all of us experience it, but B, we're also shooting ourselves. If you have OCD and you think you should not have certain emotions, you're setting yourself up, A, to have them immediately, and B, to always fail. Because
for sure,
our emotions, especially the negative ones, are on high alert when OCD comes in, and that's okay. And that doesn't say anything negative about you. It's not going to make, this is so reassurance, sorry, but it's not going to make the intrusive thoughts any more likely to happen versus them not likely to happen. But I think in saying all this, what I want to have come through is, it's okay, and I've said this a lot, it's okay to feel however you need to feel right now. And I know that's impacting your OCD, all of ours. But it's important to be able to identify with those and validate them, which helps us really connect with who we are and helps with self-compassion and self-love, which is something I think a lot of us struggle with OCD, is the ability to have self-compassion and self-love.
I know. Well, that's what the most questions I get. Well, how do I not judge myself for having these thoughts? How do I not feel guilty for having this? How do I have compassion for myself when I hate that these thoughts come into my brain? And I don't know that there's a short answer to that. It just takes a lot of internal work and some radical acceptance.
The go-to answer is always going to be, because everybody has all these thoughts. But that just it's not enough of a Band-Aid for people when they're in the thick of it and experiencing it and judging. And I will say, and Allegra was on here earlier, last week, and we were talking about this. I certainly don't like to compare themes, but I will say that harm and pedophilia theme come with such an unimaginable layer of shame for people. And that's when they really, really are going to venture down the rabbit hole of what kind of person has these thoughts. How could a good, loving mom, good, loving dad have thoughts like this about kids or their own kids? And you're right. There's no easy answer. So the best thing that I do is just to tell people, because your neighbor might be having the same thoughts and they're not bad people, or you, Windsor, or me, or so many people out there, they with OCD are struggling with the same questions, and you don't have to go through it alone.
I mean, yeah, that's all you can say, really. And it is true though, but it's just hard to accept, because it's not like someone can come in there and someone tells you that and you're like, great, I don't feel bad anymore. You still do.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And it's a tactic for OCD to get its claws in too. It's that what kind of person would ever have these thoughts? So that must mean that you're capable of them or a really bad person. So I just try to tell people to accept, just use ERP, what you've learned in ERP against the question of, am I a bad person? And ERP the shit out of that. Maybe I am a bad person. Okay, let me sit with this and think about how horrible of a person I might be. And maybe I'm right up there with Hitler, which is a shout out to one of my clients, Matt. He actually always talks about this. He was like, when he had harm thoughts, he said to me one time we were in a meeting, and he was like, sometimes I think about Hitler and I think he's a bad person, but I don't think he ever had thoughts like this. And I was like, you just compared yourself to Hitler.
I know, the self-hatred. It's like, whoa, take a step back. You have not committed any crimes against humanity, or you haven't even killed one person. You probably
when he writes me now, he always signs his name and then puts AKA Hitler.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, I think there's just an aha moment where you're like, okay, you just got to love yourself. Just like how you would, if a friend told me that they were having all these thoughts, I would still love them. And I would say, well, I know you're a good person. I know that about you. I feel that about you. And it doesn't matter. We've all had these weird rogue thoughts, you just are focusing too much on them. And so I try to tell people who ask me, how do I feel better about myself? Just treat yourself the same way you would the people that you love the most. If you're a little kid, because little kids can have harm OCD.
Oh, absolutely.
My parents, talk to yourself. You have to coddle yourself, basically, not reassure yourself, but you have to wrap yourself up and talk to yourself like the super fragile and sad person that you are, and just bring yourself up. You know what I mean? How you would if a little kid came to you and were struggling. You wouldn't be like, yeah, you're the fucking worst, girls, I hate you, get to the curb. Mm-hmm. You would say, no, you're a good person. Everyone is worthy of love. Everyone deserves compassion, and I think you just it just is a practice.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I try to, one of the things that has helped me, and I don't know if this will help you or anyone out there right now with the question, is one of the ways that I learned to develop self-love, which I still struggle with every day, but one of the ways that helped pave the path was to really, in a non-reassurance way, identify myself as a victim, because we tend to identify the fact that we are getting these thoughts as a reflection of us, when the reality is OCD, or we are a reflection of what OCD is causing. And so when I finally relented, instead of railing against OCD, being like, I am not a victim, I survived this and fuck you and everything else, when I let that guard down and allowed myself to be vulnerable enough to say, no, I was victimized. When I was 8 years old, this thing showed up in my head and rocked my world and proceeded to torment me for 12 months. And I didn't want it, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But when I finally identified that I am a victim of this, it actually allowed me to, almost poetically visit that 8-year-old girl and tell her it wasn't her fault, and tell the 14-year-old girl when HOCD showed up, it's not your fault, and scrupulosity, when that showed up, it's not your fault. And then as a 40-year-old go, oh, this isn't your fault. Obviously we can control our actions because of OCD, moving forward, especially when trauma and stuff and if substance use shows up. But the act of getting OCD is not our fault. And that somehow set me free from being able to dwell and stew in that blame game of I must be a horrible person because of this. It was just, no, this happened to me, and I'm allowed to feel trauma, and I'm allowed to come to the point to know that I can be, I have a right to be validated and to be loved.
Yeah, that's so important, because I mean, it's true. All of it's true, but everyone's just so hard on themselves. So if you're struggling, listen to Christy. Very important.
Not always, but sometimes. I mean, I think, again, it's a testament of lived experience. It's you said
in the beginning, if someone told me, because I get a lot of messages from people who are just starting therapy, or maybe haven't even started therapy, and they want to jump to the part where they don't have any bad feelings or any thoughts. I'm like, I don't know. You just have to get there. You'll get there eventually, but it doesn't come overnight, all that self-compassion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes a while. Speaking of, though, I want to get this in. What made you decide to become an advocate? You said, this has been about 6 years since you were really dealing with stuff, got effective therapy. So what made you jump from that to finally speaking out?
I think I might cry. I'll try not to.
Don't try not to. Come on now.
I had just felt so bad about myself for so long. I felt like the worst mom, but I was a really good mom. Like, I'm a very good mom. I have no doubts about that, but I just couldn't get over the deep shame that I felt. And I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't want to tell my family and friends. I couldn't let people support me because I didn't want to tell them, because I didn't want to be like that mom, like someone who couldn't handle it and whatever. And I could handle it. There was never a moment where I didn't handle my family life or my kids, but I just hated myself. And I didn't know how it could get better, right? And then it did get better, but I was still deeply embarrassed by this failure, by my mental illness that I had. And then finally, I don't know what happened, but I started thinking, like, well, what if there's probably people out there right now who are having babies and feeling shitty. And I just, like you said, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I just couldn't imagine someone feeling like that. And I came across this page of someone else who had said that they have harm OCD. And I think I saw Aaron Harvey's talk, and he basically just was really graphic, talking about how his
Aaron Harvey graphic?
What? Yeah, it was like, where he said, like, oh, I was gonna like come on my grandma, and I was like, oh my god.
He's so big at the shock value.
Yeah, because even people who are like postpartum advocates, they don't say that stuff. No one wants to say it. And I was like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to say it, because it's about time I started loving myself giving myself credit for overcoming this. And what better person to tell people about something that definitely exists than somebody who has experienced it themselves and kind of come out on the other side, you know? And I had to educate my family about it. I had to tell them, and I don't know what happened, but I all of a sudden just felt this way, like, you know what? I'm going to come out and say, if people judge me, like I come from a small island, I didn't want anyone to find out that I was this mentally ill mom who like couldn't handle it, right? I'm from Kauai. Everyone has babies. You take care of your babies. It's not a problem. But I decided, fuck it. If people find out, I just don't care. This is my story. This is my life. I deserve to be here. I deserve to be heard. Other people feel the same way too. And I don't want them to be left in the dark and struggling and crying in the night. Like, I just don't want that to happen. So I decided I was just going to tell everyone. And that was it. And once I got started, I just couldn't stop.
You know, it's interesting, as you know, I don't know if this has been your experience, but our experience is very, very similar. Mine was 12, 13 years after treatment, and I was so lonely and so tired of hating myself that and living some pretend life that I was doing everything else except for filling up the void in my own self with self-love to try to impress people and make people think that I was something. And I just thought, I think what I really need to do is just speak the truth and find people around the world. Because if I'm feeling it, they're feeling it. And that's so, but my experience, and I wonder if it's been the same for you, was so positive when I thought it was going to be riddled with negativity about the content I was going to talk about. And, you know, that people would judge me and hate me. And trust me, I'm not saying that I haven't lost relationships, but in hindsight, they were relationships that needed to be lost. But, you know, or people that just weren't ready for that kind of transparency, and that's fine too. But the positive in a way of knowing that your story has helped someone in the darkness outweighs any sort of negative comments that I've ever gotten, even horrible comments I've gotten. It's like, please hang yourself slowly on a melting block of ice. When I was talking about pedophilia, it's like, oh, okay, well, you know, okay, that's not productive. But that those comments mean nothing to me now, because the amount of people we impact by telling the truth, and then they have the courage maybe to even step out on their own and help people in their community. It's a chain reaction, and it's one that's very much needed.
I know. It was the same for me. Like, I was like so worried and embarrassed, and I was ready to have no friends. People are going to say horrible things about me. I mean, maybe they still do. I don't know. Who knows? But so many women, so many. Oh, I had the same thing. I felt the same thing. I didn't want to tell anyone. And I'm like, oh my God, good. At least you're telling me. Then maybe you can tell your husband or your partner or your mom. Who knows? But it was
pulls people out of the darkness.
Yeah. Like, I felt like it was really worth it. I just feel like it's really important to live in your truth, especially as a grown-ass woman.
Yeah. So with that, how about some final thoughts? Because we're already at like over 50 minutes. It went by very quick. So final thoughts for people who may be struggling, or who are just finding, you know, that they're just feeling really alone during this time of uncertainty, whether that is being a mom or just in general with OCD or just in general in life.
Final thoughts. Well, you're not alone. There's so many people, especially now that we're all stuck inside. People are really on the internet and available and there. And there's lots of communities, big communities and micro communities. Just don't be afraid to join them. You're not in the playground anymore. You don't have to be embarrassed to ask to play. Just go and get the support that you need, because it's there. And I don't know, just try to love yourself, and love yourself enough to find people who will love you back with knowing everything about you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And just to echo off of that, not everybody is going to understand. Not everybody is going to get it. And the reality for a lot of us with OCD is that we lose people because maybe because people can't handle or understand, but also I was saying this earlier to someone, because maybe people just can't handle someone who lives in uncertainty and needs, constant validation or whatever, which is something I struggle with at times. But life is bigger than just outside your front door. And there's so many of us out there, like Windsor, myself, Aaron Harvey, Stuart Ralph, Stephen Smith, Natasha Daniels, Catherine Benfield, the list can go on and on of people out there willing to share their secrets, share, what they've been through that are helping us all to feel more normal in these times of uncertainty, but just life in general. So look bigger, look beyond what someone may tell you that you deserve, and find out for yourself how worthy you are of love, how worthy and deserving you are of a good life, regardless of what you struggle with, and being able to revisit the person, the child or the adult inside of you when OCD first showed up, and tell them it was not your fault and it's okay, and you deserve to love yourself despite it. Those are my final words.
Those are some good final words.
Well, Windsor, please tell everybody where they can find you, and when you do advocacy, and how people can contact you if they have more questions about this topic.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a blog. It's called windsorflynn.com, WINDSORFLYNN.com. And then I'm mostly active on Instagram. It's at Windsor Flynn.
Okay. And then you do Made of Millions, a live spot on there. What day?
On Thursdays at 11 Pacific Standard Time. I'm usually doing a live, except for this week because the woman is actually sick right now. But I'll resume next week. It's called Maternal Minds, and it's usually just like a 40-minute chat with another mom, similar to what we did now. And each mom I'll cover a different theme. Like the last time was perinatal OCD, and before that was health anxiety. And so each one will cover all the different ways that OCD can impact mothering.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And Windsor, thank you for being on here. It's such a pleasure. I'm so glad we got to know each other.
Always fun.
Yeah. So for all of you listening, thank you so much for showing up to our COVID Fireside Chat. Our next one will be Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time. Woo, that'll be 10 a.m. my time, a little earlier than normal. We'll have John Hirschfeld on. We'll talk a lot about memes and probably some more self-compassion and love. But either way, please take care of yourself during this time. I want to just reemphasize, it's okay to feel however you feel. One person's right way is not the other person's right way. So embrace every emotion that you can, even if you think it's negative, because right now is the time we're all trying to work through this together. You are not alone, and we will be here to support you through this time of uncertainty. So thank you, and I will see you on Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Bye.
Bye.